Okay, so this is our last video for chapter 20, and it's going to cover two topics: responsible citizenship and radioactive age dating methods. So go ahead and copy this little bit that I have for responsible citizenship. Okay, so like any topic in chemistry, we have to talk about how we as Christians should use the knowledge that we have in this area, especially for nuclear chemistry, because with the power of the atom, this can be used for good or it can be used for evil. We use this in nuclear medicine, so that's a good thing. However, nuclear weapons are very destructive, are very powerful, have, just from the fallout from them, have terrible products that can pollute our environment, can get into our food supply, our water supply, and contaminate them, can cause cancer, birth defects, all kinds of horrible things. So we have to make sure that we are responsible with these, with this great power that we have discovered. And I'm sure all of you have heard of Chernobyl and the accident that occurred there with one of the reactors. And there was a steam explosion that ruptured, causing a meltdown, and released a massive cloud of radioactive material, and that spread contamination across the earth in the upper level winds, and people still cannot live around in that area. Thankfully, it did not contaminate the groundwater in that area, but most nuclear reactors, there's no danger as long as they're managed properly. There were obviously some problems here at Chernobyl, but most are managed better than that. There are many nuclear reactors right now, but we have to also take a look at the fact that they produce nuclear waste. This is spent radioactive control rods and byproducts of nuclear fission. Where do we store this? Right now, most of our nuclear waste in the United States from nuclear reactors is in temporary storage. It has to be stored securely to prevent damage to the environment and human health. And we really are still working on how to safely store this in a more permanent manner. And we have to remember as Christians that we are called to manage these things properly. So we really have to consider the good and the bad and make wise decisions about the use of our knowledge of nuclear chemistry. So I'll leave you with that on responsible citizenship to think about. And our last topic is at the bottom of the page in your book, and that is the Facet on radioactive age dating methods. So go ahead and copy this down. Okay, so there are some common dating methods, one of them being uranium, lead, potassium, argon, and carbon-14. With the uranium lead, you're starting with uranium, you're ending with lead. Potassium, argon, the same thing, starting with potassium, ending with argon. And I'm sure you've heard of carbon-14 dating. Now, in all of these, there are some general principles or assumptions that are made about these dating methods. The first principle is that all of these methods assume that an unstable radioactive parent undergoes decay to form a stable non-radioactive daughter isotope. It's also assumed that in these samples that in the sample, it started out as uranium with no lead present at all and decayed to the lead, or started out as the potassium and decayed to argon. So there is an assumption that it all started out as the radioactive parent. Another assumption is that scientists assume that the decay from parent to daughter occurs at a constant rate, that rate never changes, because this is scientists saying that the Earth is billions of years old. They assume that those rates stayed the same over those billions of years that they talk about. And then the last assumption is that the ratio between the two substances is used to date the material, because they're saying that all of it started out as the parent and ended up as the daughter, and the rate has been the same. They say that they can then use the ratio of the two substances to date the material. Now, there has been some research, especially by a group of young Earth creationists, to investigate these claims. And they have discovered some interesting facts that through their investigations. And so you can also read about that more in depth in your book. But one thing they would challenge is this idea that it all started out as the radioactive parent. We don't necessarily know that. When that sample was created, not all of it may have been that radioactive parent. Perhaps there was some lead mixed in with that uranium right from the get-go. And so if there was, that would make the sample appear to be older than it really is. What they also find is that in samples, that if they take different parts of the sample, they will actually show different ages from the same sample, but just taking it from different parts of that sample. They also find that 90% of all age dating methods give dates far younger than secular scientists require for their theories, and they just kind of look at that and disregard that. Now, another thing to look at here is assuming that the decay rate is the same, is at a constant rate. What they discovered in their studies was that the decay rates have varied over time. Okay, and at one point, there is strong evidence that there was an accelerated radioactive decay in the past that supports an Earth age of 6,000 years. And finally, because we can't be sure about these two top ones, that then makes us question whether those ratios are correct with the dating. And your book talks about other things, the fact that carbon-14 is actually present in coal and diamonds, and technically coal and diamonds are, if you go by what secular scientists say, are too old to even contain carbon-14 in them to be able to use to date, because they were created before the age range that carbon-14 dating is useful. So there are problems with these age dating methods that can be questioned. So that is it for chapter 20. This was a very short section. So if you want to, go ahead and start in on your test.